Redmond Reviews with Michael Redmond, 9 Down Professional. Hey, Michael.
Hi, Chris.
And of course, Chris Garlock with the American Go e-Journal. Michael, I like the shirt. What's going on with that?
Yeah, we had a sudden change in season in Japan. Like it was just about a week ago. It was back in the summer, so
Yeah.
It's like September weather, and then now we're close to the end of the year because suddenly we had a great change in temperature and it's raining all the time, and so it's very different. So I had to change.
Bring out the warm woolies. All right. Okay, so on to business at hand. Game 15. We are just making all kinds of progress here. So game 15, what do we got on offer here?
See. It's going to be another Tsukehiki Joseki, and we're going to see some, well, I don't really like to call it weird. I'll call it new and different. Some new and different stuff that AlphaGo is doing with the joseki that I don't really understand. I don't like it, and so it'll be interesting to see if eventually I change my mind. But for now, I'm going to say it's a bad move.
Oh, good. All right.
And there's all this new stuff that AlphaGo is going to try on us, and we're going to see another typical AlphaGo move later in the game, which we'll see it. It's going to be exciting too. Yeah. So let's just get into it.
All right, let's go for it.
So this is another position where white has the 3-4 point and the star point on the left side of the board.
Okay.
And actually, this is looking very much like game number 9 for the games that we've done so far. Right. And this kind of position on the left side comes up a lot in several games, something like 5 or 6 games at least that I can remember in this series. And I think in this exact board position, maybe about twice. Because in game number 9, it was the same, only, let's see, I think it was one of those black stones was on a star point. Like maybe it was the black stone in the lower right corner. So people can go back and look at number 9.
Compare and contrast.
Also, the board is going to be flipped. So you'll have to realize that this joseki in the upper left is going to be in the lower left.
Okay.
In that, yeah. So if you can adjust to that, there's no problem. And this is a position in this, like in game number 9, I think white pincered somewhere around A. And in a number of the games, in various positions, we're going to see white playing some kind of a pincer in this position on the left. But in this exact board position, which happened, I think, twice, we see white answering every time. So there's this is something you can see in professional games, in that the board position, even the positioning of one stone will make a big difference. That you could reason that could be it, but it's so subtle. Like the positioning of the black stone in the lower right corner, I would have trouble explaining why that would make such a difference.
Interesting.
So it's very subtle. It is a difference that I see in the way AlphaGo is playing in the set of games that we have. But I would probably need more games to really know if it was something that was kind of like a rule for AlphaGo, or whether it was just happening to be that way.
Okay.
In the number of games that we saw. And so now this is a position where black would be playing something on the side. Like for a human player, even the kakari that black just played, this move, would usually be played as an extension at A. And then even if black was a bit adventurous and played the kakari first, then you would be seeing black playing an extension now.
Sure.
But AlphaGo doesn't do that, and it plays this attachment in the double hane, which, as we know, is the move that AlphaGo likes to play in the book. And when I see this, although I think it was just about non-existent in human games, it doesn't look like such a unreasonable move. This is a move that looks pretty normal to me. Maybe I'm getting used to AlphaGo, but it does look pretty normal. And white has a lot of choices now. Like there's this move, which is locally the most tenacious move. It's a strong move that takes territory and stops black from making the base in the corner. There's this move, which is very simple. Anyone could play this move. And there's this move, which is maybe the most common move in this joseki system. So let's go through the normal moves, because AlphaGo isn't going to play any of these three.
Of course not.
So this one, it's strong because it's leaving the option to play a double Atari next. And when black does something like this, locally it's not really going to work for black. It's being tried, but usually you have to have the right side should be important or something for moves like this to actually be working for black. And for the time being, it's not really working very well. So usually black is just going to play a hanging connection here, because connecting solidly would not have very good eye space. This would not accomplish the living that black really wants to do. So just to pop out of that variation for a bit, this is the kind of thing that black is trying to accomplish, to make a living shape there. With the shape at A, black has a very solid eye shape, which is one of the things that this attachment is trying to accomplish. So if white plays this double hane, and when white plays the double hane, black plays this way, then this would just be a failure for black. It wouldn't be very successful. It would be similar to sliding, actually, so it wouldn't be that bad, but it wouldn't accomplish the making of eyes that black wants to do. So usually black plays the hanging connection, and this kind of thing. Connecting again would be a bit weak, so black would play the fukuromi here, and we'd have this kind of a trade. And this is actually being played locally and in this position on the left side in professional games. So this is something that could happen where black's getting a little bit extra in the center and has potential to build on that left side. But of course, white has taken away black's eye space, so white also has potential to attack there. So a lot depends on how the left side develops now.
And black is black trying to get Sentai out of this?
Well, black would continue with something to build up the left side. The next move is really hard to choose because black wants to play in the upper left area and also wants to play in the moving out towards the center in both sides, so in the lower left area too. So black might, let's just add one more move and say black might play here, because this is just a move that AlphaGo loves to play anyway. So something like this is something that could happen, but AlphaGo is not doing that. Humans are doing that. And then there's this move, which usually turns out like something like this. And this is what I would say is the most likely variation that I might play. And white has the option of still jumping in at B. But this looks like it's about even. Like white could have played that kakari, the final move, at B and invade the left side. That would just start a big fight. So I'm thinking this might happen. But AlphaGo plays a completely different move. AlphaGo plays here. And this is really hard to understand because, when black plays here, first of all, we can compare it. And now next, playing at C is a really good move for black. Like going back to this position, if white plays the connection here and black plays here, then white can just leave it.
Sure.
But when we have this shape, when white's now when black plays at C, there's going to be some extra profit from the Atari on top. Sure. So white is sort of obliged to play here. And if we have black play a next move there, this is what I would play with black. Then we can sort of compare it. Let's see if I can find the right variation. We can compare it. No, I didn't find it. We can compare it with this one. So I would jump back and forth from this variation to this variation and say that they're very similar. Like this is what I was thinking might happen. In this position, we can see the positioning of white's A stone, which should be at B. It would be a lot better to have that stone at B. Whereas in this position, white has taken a larger territory. This territory is a bit small for white. And black actually has a better position on the left side too. So I just like this better for black. I don't see any reason that this would be better for white. The one good point of this for white is that white has a solid eye space. Like if white can play the hane in the corner, then white will have two eyes. So it's easier for white to make eyes. Whereas in this position, sometimes it's a bit awkward for white to make eyes. And white does have, with those three stones that are marked with the A there, when white has that shape, there is some potential for white to run out of liberties with those three stones. So that there is some damizmar there. But I would still choose this variation. And so this difference, and AlphaGo apparently thinks this is okay for white because it plays this more than once. And so that difference in opinion is something that I would have to sort of study with AlphaGo. If I was going to change that difference, if I was going to come around to decide that AlphaGo is right after all, I would have to have a lot of data shown to me by AlphaGo, and I'd be digging into the networks.
But right now, you're not really a fan of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. I mean, it seems very odd, and that the timing seems suspicious. But
okay. And I actually made one more variation in which black plays this exchange, which is sometimes played in the upper left corner. And this is actually manufacturing a co-threat. This is something that I thought might happen. If I was playing with black, I might try to get this. This is being even more greedy, and it's not allowing white to play away. And so white would probably start the ko.
Yeah.
But I have a co-threat there. And so what's white? And now it's going to get really, really complicated because white's going to start playing some big co-threat, maybe in an attachment in one of the corners or something like that. And it would be hard to. I would have to play a few games with this just to figure out how it is. But this is something I might try with black. Because I would sort of want to punish this move. It has to be a bad move, my gut feeling.
Right.
But black just plays here and white plays here. And while I would expect, this is a move that AlphaGo might play in some other games. I don't really have a clear memory, but I think AlphaGo did play this maybe later in a different game.
Okay.
So we'll be seeing that. But in this game, AlphaGo plays a shoulder hit, which is it's a move that I would not play in this case because we'll see it happen. It loses the potential to play an extension at B because white's going to answer this shoulder hit at A, and so black's going to lose the potential to play an extension on the side there.
Okay.
And so we're going to see that happen in the actual game. So white plays one kakari, and black answers that. And we can see that with this black stone that black has just played, it would be nice for black to be able to play an extension on the left side. This is sort of pointing to the lower side. I mean, and so white plays there. Now this is a really neat move, because if white had played here immediately, then I think black would have just played here.
Right.
And this is a nice position that black has on the left side. It's going to be it's not a territory yet, but it's building into a nice net. Black is controlling the side there. So this is the move that black would play here, and white is preventing that, and preventing the left side from sort of spreading out into the center. And also white is threatening to jump down at the point labeled A. So black answers that with this move. And we can see that black is trying to leave a possible counterattack by attaching on the fifth line. So black, with this move, it's a very stubborn move, but it's preventing white from playing at A there. And it's also threatening to counterattack by jumping between the white stones. And white slides. So things have settled down a little bit. And we switched, yes.
Well, just so out of this sort of sequence on the lower side, do you think it winds up, even with white's odd move, it winds up fairly even, or is it white behind a little bit?
I think it's fairly even. I really like this move that white played. So if I was black, maybe I would not have played that shoulder hit anyway. I would have just taken this variation. And I sort of like this for black. I would say I like black better in this variation.
Okay.
So I think that both have played one move that I sort of slightly dislike, and it makes it about even from my point of view. And so black goes, and again, this is a point where a human player might be considering a pincer on the right side instead of this closer. But the corner encloser is true to the basic idea that we have to play the corner enclosures before playing extensions on the side. So it's in this way, AlphaGo is very true to the orthodox Go theory, actually, because since I would have the feeling that with that strong group that white has in the upper left, the upper side is maybe not so important. Even in such a position, AlphaGo is pretty constant in playing the sumari before an extension.
Right.
So white extends on the side. And we can see white also is leaving enough room to play another extension above that. So this is also a very standard kind of move. And black jumps in. And so now there's this move. Now this is a move that AlphaGo just likes to play.
Yeah.
And we're going to see it in a number of games. And just to explain one way that it could work is that you might expect black to play something answering it directly, in which case white can play this exchange in the corner. And generally when white plays this exchange in the corner, black has a choice of pulling back or playing an Atari in the corner. So if black pulls back, then this exchange with A for B is actually helping white in the fight that is going to start on the right side now, because it's sort of helping white enclose black on the right side there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting in the way of black connecting out to the lower right corner. Also, white does have the option to play at C later to make a living safe. So that's important. And also, if white gets into big trouble in that corner, then white can always play at B instead of Ko.
Mm-hmm.
I mean D.
D, yeah.
So the other possibility with this move is that black plays around here, but then again, that attachment on the fifth line is going to work very well for white because it stops the cut at C there. So that exchange for A and B, even locally, is very good for white.
Yeah, that's terrific.
So that would not be good for black. And so it's a move that makes this attachment and this move here, the skefkure, it makes it a good option for white next if black answers it to the left. And so this kick here is a very sharp move. This is taking away white's potential in the corner. Mm-hmm. And right now, the right side, like if white plays something, like say white plays something like this, actually the right side is bigger probably because all the fighting that is about to start on the right side makes the right side bigger. And so it's forcing. So white answers the kick. And now black plays the hane on the left. So black has sort of refuted white's move. But again, the attachment is still working to strengthen white's group there. So it's still not a bad move. And so to go back to this move, I think this is a move that I sort of like.
Yeah,
it gives a lot of potential to white. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I really like it, but then I was thinking that I was thinking about the kick, and again, we talked about this before. That a lot of times, you get your wrist slap for doing the kick, but it really works, right?
In this case, it's important for black to be taking the corner away from white. Take the options from white. I should go back and say that playing here immediately was also an option, but it wouldn't be as effective because this time black would be able to cut here, and so it would be a completely different story. This actually it would be a trade of the right side for the lower side. Maybe it would work, but it would be a completely different story in any case. So this is something that that shows how it would change that when white plays the attachment first. It's right. White sort of trying to make that work better, and black refutes that with this stone. And so white extends. And so at this point, white is just trying to play as many forcing moves as possible, just because the lower side, why don't I use the marking tool and mark this stone? This stone is sort of erasing a lot of black's potential on the lower side. And that's why I don't like this move that black played. That exchange there is taking away a very big move that black would have later in this kind of development. And so, but black does answer it. Black has to answer that. And so white has taken the fences on the right side. So locally, this has worked fairly well for white.
For white, yeah, it looks nice.
Yes. And black cuts here. This is punishing white for the forcing move that white plays. So this is taking advantage of that. But again, you can see I've marked it up to say that the B and C exchange is something I really don't like in this position. It's an example of how that can be a bad exchange for black.
And it's just not getting any. It's not really growing on you either. I mean,
there's no use for that. Yeah. And white's going to capture the side now. So black plays the, and black's redemption sort of is that black can play this extension on the side, and that marked stone there, as is often the case with AlphaGo, it doesn't give up so easily. Like it's still black can still reuse that stone. For the time being, it's going to be a lot of trouble if white plays away, and that's just a random move. I'm not really suggesting that seriously.
Right.
But black can play here, and it's going to be a lot of trouble for white. Like this kind of thing would be a disaster. And even if white plays on this side, it's going to be difficult for white because this is a more black loses a bit on the upper part of the right side, but this is just terrible on this side. So this would be bad too.
That's painful.
So just two examples of what can happen. So white has to deal with that. So obviously AlphaGo plays a forcing move first. And there's actually some meaning to this. Like it's locally the smart move would be maybe to play something like this, and this would start to capture the right side. But this, of course, induces this extension here, and we will start to see the upper right corner turning into black's territory, and it will soon. And with forcing moves, like black still has a forcing move here, and so with all of this, white is going to lose the opportunity to break into the upper right corner. So this is actually a very good time for white to play this exchange and just sort of, and this is forcing enough that black's not going to start anything on the right side right now, probably. So white black answers that. And with this exchange, white has the Atari at A, which is going to make a life in the corner. So now white plays here. Oh, sorry, white plays here first. Another forcing move. And this is actually threatening to run out with the ladder. This is a ladder breaking move. So white plays all of these forcing moves and finally comes here. This is actually a very beautiful, it's a very nice sequence. Like sometimes I bad talk AlphaGo when it plays these forcing, but in this case, it's there's a reason for every forcing move, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, flow is really nice.
Yeah, and so black plays this. Looks a bit vulgar, but black is basically sort of testing. The question is, how does white answer at this point? So black is asking a question here, and when white answers here, it means that later in the game, it's not as if I'm suggesting this move now, but later in the game when black plays like this, black's going to have no trouble connecting up.
Right.
And so there is the possibility that white plays something like this.
I was wondering about that one.
This gives white really bad shape when black does stuff like this, and white has to decide whether to connect here or to maybe, you know, as far as shape is concerned, you would be tempted to play here, but then you'd be losing territory as well as your eyes. So let's say white plays here. That means when black does stuff like this, it's going to be a lot easier for black to close off the side there. Like white doesn't have the options that white had in the game, which we're going to see fairly soon, but white's going to be forced to crawl underneath. So it's easier for black to press down from above when black does this. And so the big question, black's just asking a question of white here. Are you going to bump against, which is maybe a bigger territory and better above, but the loss in on the right is so big that white didn't do that.
It feels so submissive, but it seems pretty much absolutely necessary, right? I mean, it's so painful the other way.
Yeah, so painful. And we can see there's going to be a ko coming up later in the game when black plays. Let's just mark that point. It's this point where black can play an Atari, but the Atari is not 100% forcing now. So when black does play that Atari, it's going to turn into a ko. And, you know, I have the feeling that AlphaGo just loves to leave that uncertainty behind. And so black jumps out. And so since white did pull back, black doesn't have to play in the immediate area. Like in this position, in this position, when white plays here, black is probably going to continue in the immediate area. Just because this is just such a more effective move now. But since white pulled back, black doesn't have to play any more moves in this area. Sort of black has accomplished a very small gain and plays out into the center. And black is sort of threatening the two marked stones, A and B, threatening to attack on a large scale. So this would be a good local move. But actually, I'm this is a variation I put in to try to explain what's going on the right side, because when black did play here, what white did is white added a stone to the right side. And so the meaning of this move is that there is a lot of bad dodgy when black plays at B.
Right.
And it's very troublesome. Like white has to choose between this move, which is a bit submissive. It's going to give a bit of territory to black, or this move, which is going to be a semi, or this move, which is a very stubborn move. But this move has problems when black plays here, and white has to answer again. And then there's going to be forcing moves for black at B and C too.
Yeah, right.
So black hasn't really lost any territory in this exchange on the right side, and it's going to be playing a lot of forcing moves. So it's just a bad agi, which is going to give white a headache. So this way, black's going to start. Black needs a co-threat, but black can start something here, because at this point, if white connects against this move, white's going to lose the semi. So there's this kind of thing that's going to happen, and it's going to be a big ko. At this point, I don't think black has a valid co-threat for it, but this would be something white has to worry about. So it all depends on black would have to prepare the co-threat before doing anything here. But with a potential fight on the left side where black might be attacking white, black could be able to make some co-threats. So that's something white has to worry about. And then this is what might actually happen, but this would be a bit painful for white. Black would be getting very good shape in the corner and these forcing moves. So this would be okay for black. So there is this issue that white has to deal with. And in the timing when black plays here, setting up a potential attack against white on the left, which means that black might pretty soon have co-threats. It's a good timing for white to be playing this move, which is actually a very big move as far as territory is concerned too. And so that was a move that was like sort of strange looking. Like as far as if you're just looking at the territory alone, it's a bit early. But I thought about it and I decided that there was a good reason for this move.
Yeah, no, and showing that variation, it's clear that it's pretty painful if you don't do that.
Well, handling that black move was a lot of trouble for white. And so black plays here. The idea with this move is black is trying to shut off the upper side. And now black plays a nice tetsuji, which is this move, which usually would expect black to play at A, like this. So, but this would be like this, and it's actually a very fine distinction. This is what I would expect to happen. It's not as if white can do any better than this. But in this case, white has, compared to the game, let's see if I can get the game. This is the game situation. It's like this, and black has played here. This is what happens in the game. In this variation, white has curled once extra at A. So that's the comparison here. White is in this position. White can leave it now. In this position, white has had to curl once extra at A, which is usually bad for white. But in this case, it doesn't really make much difference because the upper side it's not really a battlefield area. It's an area that is sort of getting closer to the end game. And the advantage for white in this variation is that the peep at C is going to be forcing.
Right.
And so that's going to make a real difference to the center. And so actually, although it's a very fine difference between this move and this move, in this case, cutting is maybe a good move. So white captures the stone and then black plays an Atari on top. Obviously, white cannot connect on the third line now. That would be terrible.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the difference. And we can see white has sort of, although white captured a stone, which is nice, white has sort of been pushed down onto the second line in a position where, if we compare with this, white is on the third line there at B. And so this is the biggest possible white territory, whereas in this case, white has sort of added a stone on the second line. So a very slight gain for black, maybe. So and also it's a tetsuji. This is cutting here is a tetsuji, which will make you look like a strong player in any case. So it's something.
So you like that?
Yeah. And so white jumps here. So at this point, white really does have to worry about the left side. So white's adding a stone here, and it helps that the corner is so strong now. So
I see. Okay, it doesn't have to. If black descends, it's not a problem.
It's no problem. It's just the points.
Gotcha.
So white would answer that with something like this, and it would be okay. And so this is a big move on the right side. Again, black is looking at the Aji there on the right side. And at the very least, black's going to play at A next, which is going to be a forcing move, and that's going to start building on the upper side moyo there. So white answers that. So that makes sense too. So a lot of the game is making a lot of sense in the middle game here.
Sounds like you're setting us up.
Yeah, you're getting used to me. Yeah, it just gets crazy in the end game. And so black plays here, and again, so now when black plays here without that cut on the second line, like there was a position earlier when I was talking about when black would have a cut here. In this case, white can actually play the attachment here, and so white can fight more strongly. Like if black pushes through, white can cut here, and it's a bit surprising seeing it happen, but white can actually capture those black stones on the left.
Wow,
like
that's
something
nice.
like this.
Yeah,
I can just push through and cut. Otherwise, if black jumps out this way, there's a famous Tesuji, which you probably recognize this one.
Yes, I was just looking to see if that works. It does, doesn't it? Oh,
it's
very
sort of
cool.
Like cranes, very close.
Yeah, I was just it's like a semi-crane's nest.
Yeah. And so that's so black did not push through. Instead, black disconnected.
Sure.
And so this was locally a success for white because white managed to play the clamp there, this move.
So is this part of why you're still, I mean, you're just not seeing anything that justifies that shoulder hit yet, right? I mean,
it turned into a bad move. It was partly because white played to make it happen. The way white played in the upper, the lower right corner, sort of made that single move a bad move. So that was white's strategy there. And that's something you can see happening even if you're not making a mistake. It's something that white has just adjusted its play to refute that black move. But I see very few variations that I can think of in which it would become a good move. And so I still don't like the shoulder hit that it played. It's just sort of randomly throwing out shoulder hits is what I'm saying.
Random shoulder hit. Oh.
So now when black peeps here, obviously, well, if we're just looking at local moves, it's saying if white connects, black's going to play maybe something like this, or maybe black would just leave it. But black's going to get some territory there, right?
Sure.
So white starts to refute that with this attachment. And this was also an area where it was very well played by white. And this attachment, if black pushes through here, it can be a lot of trouble when white cuts. And so I had a lot of fun figuring out these variations, because at this point, black has a choice of connecting here, which is the strongest local move, or just taking the one stone, which is just giving away the corner, or playing here and making kind of a compromise. So if black makes, let's say black takes the corner, this is the easy one. White will just take the corner. I mean, if this is when black gives away the corner. This is a lot of points in the corner.
Huge.
And it's bigger than what black got on the side. So it's a bit disappointing for black. So we go back and say, what if black makes the compromise? This is the safe move, but white's going to push here, and there's a peep here, which there's all sorts of variations. People could play with this position. It looks like white might be able to get something.
A bit of a squeeze, maybe.
It looks like white might be able to get a squeeze. There's not anything that's really that dramatic that white can do. So I'm just going to say white's going to play the peep and then connect. But white does have the cut at C next, which is going to be troublesome. And the jump at B can cut black off. So black ends up with a bit of a weak. And we can see that all of this stuff that white did here has added a little bit extra to what white gets here. It's left a lot of seeds of trouble for black to deal with.
So am I I mean, it just white seems like white is doing really well here. I'm not quite feeling it for black at this point.
Well, yeah, the timing of this move was very well timed. Was a very sharp move, and locally it's going to be a success for white.
Okay.
To go into this variation, which is the fun one, white curls once and plays a hanetsugi here.
Yeah.
And we get a semi-act.
Yeah, that's a little tricky. Is there?
For the time being, both sides have 4 liberties. So let's see. There's this move is the direct move. Like If black plays anything like this, then it will be very easy for white to win the semi, because it's just 4 moves against 3 moves.
Right.
So if black plays this one, then white's going to play a hane. And let's see what I did. This white can play here, and this is going to be a kind of a ko.
Oh,
and
my.
so, but you can still see black is still not cut on the left there. That peak there is still just a peak. So black has not really gained very much on the left part of this.
Potentially lost a lot.
Potentially lost a lot in the corner. So this is okay for white. It's going to be a ko, so of course you never know what's going to happen there. If black plays this one, white can bump against black once. And while threatening a Watari, a connection underneath, white has actually extended the liberty. So white's going to just win the semi in this case. And then, of course, there was this variation in which black extends the liberties of the corner group. So this is actually a very sharp move. But at the very least, white can make a life too. So there's this variation, which I think is correct. It's going to be another ko. So we have all these kos that could have happened. If black plays, let's just go back to the original move here. If black pushes through here and then connects in the corner, we have all sorts of kos that could have happened in the corner. So that would have been dangerous for black. So that's the dangerous variation for black that leads to a lot of kos. And then there's this one that gives the whole corner to white, which is not very satisfying. And this one that also gives white some extra force. So in the game, instead of pushing through here, black covered. And so if white plays at A, black can play at B, and there's no problem. But white plays here now, and we can see again it's a bit of trouble, because if black answers on the left, white's going to push. Now, white's going to get the corner on a big scale, because black would like to, this is a point where if white plays it, it's just the end of the corner. But if but white can curl around once here and get some extra liberties, again threatening to connect underneath. And so white wins the semi.
Wow.
And so this is going to be a disaster for black. So when white plays here, black has no option of answering that move directly, and black has to clasp the one stone. So locally, again, this is a gain for white. White has succeeded. But of course, black does have the connection, the forcing move at A to make a connection. So black has sort of settled the area, and black is connected because of forcing move at A. So it's not as bad as it looks, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, that's good, because it doesn't look great to me. But but I mean, yeah, no, it was interesting with the I think for a lot of folks, and answering that peep would be sort of, I mean, I think either just respond directly or possibly Tanuki, since it's not actually 100% Sente. But that whole sequence there with a fair number of sort of innocuous seeming moves, but your variations show that there's a lot more going on there.
Yes, well, I really want to dig in to figure out what's going on, because if it's sort of random trades, then that would be a sign that AlphaGo is not understanding the game. But when every time I actually dig into it, I can find reasons for the moves, which is which shows that AlphaGo is actually, in effect, it's reading, and I don't really know if that's what it's supposed to be doing. So I'd be very interested to learn at some point what the actual process is for AlphaGo, because I think it's going to be different than humans in any case. And then black switches back to this is a forcing move, and black is sort of preparing to finish off the upper right corner. But first, black starts with this move, which is it's a big move on the left side, and white answers here. This is a point with white I would want to play at A, but I think since the latter is good for black, maybe white was just being a bit more cautious here, and so black answers on the second line, and white jumps out. And so this sort of it gives the white group some strength. But this white group that is sort of floating on the left there is going to be the focus of the end game, because this group is not settled. And so when you have a game between strong players, all of the end game moves, or most of the end game, is played with black trying to take away eyes from this group. So it's actually a very middle game-like end game, because if white can make a territory there, something like 10 points, to make a life for that group, it's not just the territory. It's not just a 10-point move. It's taking away a lot of forcing moves from black. And so it's very important for white to try to make some territory for this group. And from black's viewpoint, black wants to keep the group unstable so that black can push it around a little bit. And so that's going to be more important than most of the end game moves. And it's going to be a lot of the story about the rest of the game, actually. But for the time being, this move is really big. Like, this is about, it's about 20 points.
Wow.
And also it adds strength to the black group. Like, if white is going to live in that corner, then black would have to worry about the outside stones. So this is a big move. So this is a 20-point move. And white plays one. This is a kind of a probe. Usually you would expect black just to play here and capture the stone.
Sure.
And white will play here. This is going to be a forcing move now. And so that was the idea. White wanted to play that forcing move at B. And that's just it. So black connects here, which is it's locally a bad move. But now white does not have any forcing moves against the corner. That's the basic difference there. And so white plays here. And this is a very interesting point in the game, because white could have made some territory with this move. So I looked into this move, but this is basically an example of just being too tight, because black will play from the outside now. And if white does play like this, white will get some territory. But this just allows black to control the rest of the board.
Sure.
So black would have some potential territory in the center there. And later on, when black plays, for instance, a move somewhere around here, this is going to contribute to the upper side too. So there's a lot of extra stuff that black is getting out of this, which would make it not satisfying for white. So white plays here.
A lot of this is really about, as you were saying, that middle white group, and black trying to get control of the center.
Right. And so there is a lot of space in the center here, and usually you would expect it to be no man's land.
Yeah,
because both white and black are sort of out there. But when we look at all of the shapes, most of black's groups are pretty strong. Like, there's that captured stone in the lower right area, and then there's that group in the upper left, which is actually pretty strong. And of course, black in the upper right corner has a very thick shape. And if we look at white's left side, that's a group that is sort of loosely connected, but black does have potential to have some forcing moves, which we're going to see right now. And then the right side white territory, there's sort of open space from above that black still has potential to force with. So both of those white groups are not as strong as the surrounding black group. So I'm expecting there to be some extra territory for black in the center, whatever happens. So how it deals out is going to be the big problem here.
Okay.
So black jumps in here. And this is a very...
That seems like a vital point.
It's a very scary move, right? But actually, I'm going to say it's a very good move, too, because it's sort of... black has to jump in here. Allowing white to get a 10-point territory in this vicinity would be bad.
Too much.
And also, there's all of these forcing moves that black has to continue with. Like, there's this move, and black would then run out. But black still has to push through at A. And so this move here that black is playing is looking at moves like this jump, which actually have potential to cut white.
Yeah.
And so white is not connected there, and black is taking advantage of it. So it's a move that, for the moment, it looks scary, but actually it's a very severe, strong attack against white. So that's a really sharp move. And so white curls around. So white cannot like this variation. And there's also the point that black has this fairly strong position on the lower side. All those stones they're a wall, basically, which means that white is, in this variation, white is sort of getting pushed against the wall that black has on the side. So it's the wrong direction.
I wanted to go back to the black's move, the very beginning of black's placement. It almost reminds me of, I think it's a classic Chinese problem, one of those really ones with a cool name. Black Pearl escapes to the sea or something like that.
Oh, it's that problem that's right in the middle of the board, and and there's this black group that looks like it's captured, right?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Is it the center of the stones problem where you play in the center of the symmetrical shape?
Yeah. You guys can look it up, or maybe we'll throw it into the SGO. It's obviously
one of the problems. It probably does come from an ancient Chinese problem set, because there were a lot of those.
Yeah. Well, I always like those because they're not only great problems and very good for studying, but they're also always so poetically named.
Oh yeah. Well,
it's not just.
Yeah. The Chinese had a way of naming their problems. Yes.
Yeah. So
So with this move, instead of being pushed against the wall on the lower side, white is trying to curl around to get something on the outside of the center, towards the upper side, which is the direction white wants to go. So I agree with this move too. And so black can easily escape. So black plays like this, and we can see some territory sort of appearing on the lower side. So white curls around to stop that. And now this move, it cuts white off.
Mm-hmm.
So after black is played here, white has to worry about this weakness here. Without that, white would have had the option of connecting to the corner. So that's the reason for this. It's also giving a kind of a lifeline to the black group on the lower side, which is getting a bit weaker than it was before. So white answers. So this is getting rid of the cut at A. And so what you can see, white sort of pretending to put pressure on the upper left black group, which is actually not so weak, but it does make a bit of a difference. So black answers that, and white jumps. And so we can see that white has skillfully dodged the attack. While black has cut white off, white is starting to make some territory in the center area.
Yeah.
So white's goal at this point is to make some territory in the center, territory in the center. And black is trying to get something on the upper side. Black is sort of finishing off the upper side territory in the process here. So that's what black's goal is.
Okay.
Black plays, and I can see you still think this is going well for black.
Well, no. What I was just thinking was that a little while ago you were mentioning, and I completely agree that it just all looked like dame in the middle, and all of a sudden black is kind of manufactured some points in that lower section, and white is starting to look like it's getting something, and so it's really some pretty skillful play there on both sides.
Yeah, well, up to this point, I think that it's demonstrating how important the center is to both sides.
Yeah.
And how, like, you can see some big moves in the corners, for instance, like the lower right corner, there's a big move there covering on the first line.
Yes.
And the lower left corner is a move that comes to mind too, but the center is much more important. And attacking white in the center will have all sorts of effects for black.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what black is trying to do. And this comes up to something that's going to happen pretty soon now, because curling is okay with forcing. White played an attachment. This was a point where white maybe should have played at A first. Bumping against black at A would have reinforced white in the center, because what happens now is black cuts here. And this is sort of a turning point in the game, because black has to accomplish something to attack white in the center. Black has to come onto the defensive here. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult for black to catch up in territory.
Right.
And so black's attempting an attack here. And I tried to find out what terrible things are going to happen to white if white plays here. And I had to give up, because I think this is better than the game. So just to go back a bit, one thing that I would suggest is maybe white could play here once, and then something like this, and then continue in the center. This is one way for white to have what looks like a good position to me.
There's no troubles then, right, for white?
Yeah, no troubles. Center. White's going to get some territory in the center. Black's going to get some more territory on the upper side, and it's going to be a close game. But from the flow of play, I have the feeling that white's going to have a lead. So I like this for white. And my second choice for white is to fight now, because in the game, this black stone came to life. But what if white captures it? And black has this, well, black has this forcing move from the left.
Ooh, that looks scary.
And it looks a bit scary, but it's not going to amount to much. Like black can choose between something like this is not really a big deal. Something like this would be good if it worked, but actually it doesn't work. The cutting black stones are actually captured already.
Nice, yes.
There's no way for it to escape. Or black could play something like this. But the problem with this is that although black gets some points on the side there, there's actually a lot of stuff happening on the upper side too. Because if white plays here, black has to answer that. And white can just reduce the upper side.
Sure.
And this would be huge. It would be, black does have a ko when black plays at B. And so there are some reasons for black to want to play this way. But the upper side, the loss on the upper side is so huge, it's not worth it.
Right.
I would say it's not worth it. And it's dangerous for black too. Black's still not connected. And so there's this move. This move, white would just answer on top. And it's not really that much different from what black can do anyway, because that left side was a weak area.
Was always there.
Yeah, so it's not a big deal. Like something like this could happen. This is just so much better than the actual game for white that I'm going to say this is a win for white. So we come back to this move. I could find no reason for white not to capture it. But in the game, white now plays the bump against here. And it wasn't in time. It didn't work this time. So like if white could have forced that, then there would be any number of ways to capture that cutting stone in the center. If this would be forcing, and if we say that black has to answer here, then white would have a lot of options as to how to, like white could even play something like this, and it would be a very different on the left here, because white could just answer that move, and there would still be no way for black to escape. So there would be a big difference there if that was forcing, and that's why I was suggesting on playing it earlier at this point. But it's not forcing right now. Black. This was a very sharp move, because now it's forcing. Now if white plays away, black has this extra forcing move, which is going to cut on the left there.
Oh gosh. So
this is actually a much more effective move than it was in the other variation, where I was playing it after that. It wasn't working in this variation, but it's very effective now, because white cannot allow this to happen. So white has to answer that. And now black gets to capture this stone, and black is threatening to cut white off with the move at A. Black can cut white off with A. So this becomes a forcing move, and white answers it, and black can still connect here with Sente. White pushes through here. This is going to be a forcing move, but for the time being, black plays on the upper side. So black has played this exchange in the center with Sente. And white answers once here. This is a Tesuji to reduce black's upper side. Black runs away once in the center. So white answers that. And black plays here. So this is, finally, this is sort of settled the position on the upper side. So black has sort of maintained the status quo on the upper side while gaining a huge amount in the center. Because if we say all of those black stones are okay, then that means that the white's group in the center is going to be in big trouble.
Wow.
So the big question is that black group okay? It's capturing that white stone on a ladder, but what about the ladder? I was sort of waiting for you to ask that, but yeah, I'll do it.
Well, I was still stuck on why white played the bump up in the wrong sequence. I'm sort of flabbergasted with that.
I'm just going to call it a mistake.
Okay, all right.
I don't know. We need AlphaGo to diagnose that itself. Yeah, maybe it would find a, but you know, I don't see why this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I would play here. But actually, I think this other variation where white plays the bump earlier might actually be better. Right. You can see that there's a slight loss that white is taking on the upper side. Black's territory is better formed in this position. So ideally, white could play all of this stuff first and then play the bump as the final move of this exchange.
Right, but
so it just didn't work that way.
It just doesn't make any sense to me after the cut. I'm just not understanding. But anyway, we'll move on. Doing it this, it almost it's a sequential kind of a blunder almost.
Well, if it was a human player or a weaker player, I would suggest that white had assumed that this was forcing and just made a mistake.
But that doesn't make sense for AlphaGo.
I sort of hesitate to say that for AlphaGo because AlphaGo has creamed all the top Go players, and I think AlphaGo is too strong to make a simple mistake. But I can't explain it anyway.
Okay, all right. Never mind. We'll just move on. All right. So to the next thing here. That is such a sharp move.
Yeah, and it was very sharp play by black. So I guess there is the potential that white had just not calculated that. But now we come to the point where in the actual game, white played this big Yosei move. So that's a huge move. But the question is, what about A? What about the running away here?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm also worried about is white just looks overall, that group of whites looks very thin.
It's very thin in the center. This has really changed the position to a great deal because this white center group is so weak that it's going to give black a lot of opportunity to. And of course, black did give up something on the upper side. We can see that the upper side black territory has shrunk a little bit, but it's gonna expand again now that black can start to attack.
Well, this is a variation of what you talked about a while ago about black's plan to sort of torture that white group and get benefit out of it, except it's on a massive scale now, right?
Right, I mean, and this is something that whites have been playing to avoid.
Yeah.
And so this is clearly a mistake. It's a bad turn that the game has taken for white.
Yeah.
But of course, if white can escape here, if this move works easily, then white would be able to capture some black stones in the center. So that would fix everything. But I've decided that black can attach here. And this is definitely a forcing move. There's no way white can ignore this move. So white has to answer locally somehow. And this is going to develop into a really cute ladder.
Oh, I see it coming. Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, there's a puppy dog.
And he wants to get down. That's goodbye to Choco. Yeah.
Choco wanted to see the magic ladder here.
And it's not as if the ladder itself works, but the instructions to the right side is so bad. Like
that is so cool. Can we see that again in slow motion?
Yeah, sure.
That was
so it all starts with this,
and it's all driven, right? It's a one-way street, right?
Well, this is the point where white has a choice. But it's very difficult to refute the ladder and save the right side at the same time. Because connecting there at the right of this stone would be just too devastating. So white has to answer somehow locally. And so this is the most reasonable move. But after that, it becomes forced. There's no way white can escape.
It's
so there's one more
gosh. Oh, no.
So that's the whole corner there. And so this is a position where you can chase a ladder all across the board, and that's going to be worth it. Yeah, and that does happen.
That is really cool.
So white didn't do that, but white played here. But the fact that white cannot escape at A is meaning that this is already looking bad for white. And so I think you were feeling, and also I was agreeing with you, that the game was actually looking pretty good for white. But it all depended on white getting some territory in the center to settle that group on the left. And so with this destructive loss of territory for white, it's changed the game. And
the whole feeling has changed now.
And so black plays here in the center. And this, of course, is a ladder breaking move for A. It's a ladder capturing move, you might say.
Yeah.
It also is starting to attack white in the center. So it's going to be trouble for white. So white plays a hane. And so we can see white's territory on the right is shrinking a little bit. And black has connected. And of course, AlphaGo again takes this timing to play this kind of move. This is a forcing move that is sort of reinforcing black's connection on the lower side. So there is some meaning to it. The fact that black gets a stone at this point, it gets rid of the cut at B. So this is, it's just that AlphaGo likes to play these forcing moves at a very precarious point in the game, when black is supposed to be answering white in the center. But it's big enough to be forcing right now. And so black goes back to the center. And so white is more or less connected there in the center. So white has saved the center group. And black plays here to make a connection. And we can see it now that the territory in the upper right area is expanding again. It's getting bigger again. White pushes through here. And again, black is continuing to put pressure on white by playing this move. Not only is it connecting up the black groups, it's also keeping white cut off from the corner. And white pushes, now black plays here. And we can see the black's group in the lower right actually also has to be careful because it didn't have eyes until black played this exchange. So at this point, black has either can make eyes fairly easy or connect up on the left there. And it takes a lot of work for white to actually take away black's eyes. So with this stone, black's pretty safe. So white switches to the center. This is a big move and black, again, these two moves, this is the biggest move as far as territory is concerned, but it also has to do with black size. So white is gaining some territory in these exchanges. But then there's this right side area where white's territory is really is shrunk a lot, and white is in a kind of a damizumari situation there, a lack of liberties, which we're going to see when this happens. And white starts to surround the right side. White still has to be very careful.
Choco. It's a return of Choco.
And so at this point, white's still in damizumari. Like if white plays away something, then this happens. This would be bad. So white has to answer that. And so there was a huge difference in the size of white's territory on the right. But of course, the game is not going to end simply. And black plays this Atari in the corner. And this is a point where I think black could have won by simply extending at A. And I did take a quick look at the end game. It's still a very difficult end game to finish, I think, but it looks like black's going to win. But of course, playing the Atari is more exciting. And so we're going to see a sequence of Ko's. Right now, when white bumps against black on the left side, white is threatening the Ko at A. So that would be a dangerous Ko for black. Without this move, actually, black had some potential to connect on the side there. Black could even just play a Hane on the first line, and black would be able to connect on the side.
Does the clamp work too?
The clamp depends on stuff in the center. That would usually work too.
Okay.
Like pushing through on the fifth line first. Let's just have white pushing through on the fifth line and then playing here would work.
I see. Okay.
So there's no problem there until white plays here. So this is forcing black to connect here.
Big Ko.
A big Ko. And white plays this. White has this big Ko threat. And black seems to have a lot of options, but black chose this one just to make another Ko. Because white's going to run out of Ko threats. And so white finishes this Ko. And this Ko is important in that it's setting up Ko threats for white on the left. It's, the reason I didn't like black's original move in playing here is that when white wins this Ko, this black group on the left sort of becomes a Tsumego problem. And it's alive. It's alive, but white's going to have all these forcing moves at B and C. Yeah. And if these are actually forcing, that's going to change the outcome of all of the Ko's that are going to come in the future. And we're going to have some more Ko's, you might have realized. But it's really important in regards to the Ko's that white has all these Ko threats on the left side, which usually would be forcing. But it turns out sometimes they weren't. Like if white just connects here, it would be a peaceful endgame. But this is just not good enough for white. It's just a loss for white. So white plays a Ko. And so now they're going to fight this Ko in earnest because this is a really serious Ko for white. White would like to be able to win it. So white has these Ko threats in the upper right corner. These are pretty big. They're more than 20 points now. And so they continue the Ko. So the first Ko threats are pretty straightforward. And this is a really sharp move. This is threatening the cut underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And usually white would counter this with a cut here. But this would be, this would sort of allow black all sorts of potential to play some, at the very least, to play some more co-threats on the right side. So
it's a little dangerous too.
There's some dangerous in regard to the ko too. So this is the safe move. But when white does play that safe move, black has gained something like 1 point in exchange. So it's a very small, maybe even less than a point, but it is a small gain for black. So this is a point where I would suggest that instead of playing this ko-threat, maybe white should have played this ko-threat, which is going to be another ko. So if black plays here, white can play here, and this is not a live shape. And if black plays the ko here, we have this kind of ko coming up, and white could use that ko-threat in the upper right for that ko.
Nice.
And then all of the other ko-threats would be invalid. So it would be much more of a problem for black. And so this is a kind of an unresolved. Black does have some ko-threats, like, for instance, this move, which would be a local loss for black. So there would be a complicated choice, and there's all sorts of things that could happen, but I sort of like this for white. I think it looks dangerous for black. So I would suggest this might be a chance for white to play this ko-threat at this point, leaving that one extra ko-threat in the upper right. And the reason it wasn't coming earlier is because white had to use this ko-threat first.
Right.
So white wanted to use this ko-threat as a ko-threat, and so it comes after that white has the chance to play this as a ko-threat. But in the game, white finished off all the ko-threats, and so partly because AlphaGo has this habit of throwing away ko-threats, and partly in things that I'm seeing in the ko-fights like this, I still think that AlphaGo's ko-fighting is not perfect. Like it's a lot better than it was when it was playing against Lisa et al. That was when AlphaGo was already strong enough to beat the top ko player.
Sure.
But it was still making some mistakes in the ko-fights. Like it seemed to be avoiding ko-fights when it was playing Lisa et al. And then in the Master Series, it was okay with ko's, but it wasn't really aggressively going into them like this version of AlphaGo does. And in this version, AlphaGo is playing very well in most of the ko-fights, but in a complicated position where the timing of the ko is also important. I find positions like this where I can question the timing of AlphaGo starting a ko. This would be a position that would be very challenging for a top human pro also. So it could be the advantage of my being able to spend some time studying the game that helps me find these mistakes.
Ko's are really interesting, even at the amateur level, because I find that, when you're teaching, many of Go's, rules are really, simple and straightforward and logical, but man, try to explain just how a ko works, right? And then what you're talking about is an entirely other level. I mean, there's the sequencing and the value, and ko is this wonderful, simple game, but ko is complicated.
Oh, it's when you start to understand it, it's the most exciting part of the game, really. So it's a very rich part of the game. And so just because this lower right corner...
I want to ask you a historical question real quickly, and you may not know the answer, so I'm sorry if that's the case, but I forget, and I have a vague memory, but ko was not necessarily there at the beginning, right? Wasn't ko invented later on?
Oh, that's a question I don't have an answer to. Well, my feeling is that people would find it pretty quickly.
Okay.
And they would find this position. Well, they would find this position that repeated forever. And that's the way I teach ko to beginners, because I just let them have it come up in their games. And if it happens to them in an actual game, it becomes fairly obvious that this would last forever. And actually, the word ko is a word that the Japanese, maybe the Chinese too, actually. It's a Buddhist word that is used in some phrases. And the word itself means a very long period of time. It's like an eon. And so it's a very long period of time that comes up in religious literature.
Uh-huh.
And then there's one or two compound characters or compound words that still have that within it. But as a word itself, it has sort of disappeared from the language, the Japanese language. But it is a character that means a very long period of time. It's unbelievably long. And so it's a good way to introduce people to the Japanese people when they're beginning the game. They can understand the that part of it more easily.
Interesting. Okay.
The language.
All right. There's for the Go history buffs out there, that was your moment. So.
Yeah, well, someone who knows their history can probably tell us and give us the answer in the comments.
And use our comments section, please do. Yeah. Thank you.
Because I'm more of an amateur historian. I have an interest, but I don't really have the full knowledge of the Go history. Yeah. And I have some knowledge from the viewpoint of Go players and their games and stuff like that, because that's what I've really studied. So go back to the ko here. I was talking about a ko in the lower left area. This ko in the lower right area is not as big as the lower left. So that means that these ko threads here in the center of the board are going to be big enough. They're valid ko threads. So the ko keeps on going. And both players have ko threads in this area. So white finally plays this one, another ko.
How many for those keeping track at home? 1, 2, 3. Are we up to 4 now? 4, 5.
I think it might be the third. Well, the of kos that were actually played.
Right.
There were threatened kos.
Okay. Yeah.
And so now they have a ko in the upper left corner. This is okay for black because actually black has some ko threads in there. So, and this is a ko thread black wanted to play anyway. And so white plays this very strange move inside black's territory. And this is, I'm going to call this a bad move too, because in effect it's ruining the value of the following ko threads. This ko thread itself was answered when black played here, but
sure.
It would have been better for white to start with this ko thread. And the value of this ko thread is, for the time being, it's threatening to make a ko. If black answers it, let's have black answer. If black answers it, then all of the following ko threads are going to be forcing, like this. Let's see, where can black play a ko thread? Let's have black play a ko thread here. All of these moves are going to be forcing because it's no longer a ko. Once black connects there on the second line with this move, once black connects at this point, all of the following ko threads are not going to be a ko. They're going to be forcing. They're going to be threatening to kill black outright. And so white would have enough ko threads to win the ko in this case. So we're going to have black play away and finish the ko in the upper left, and white starts a ko here. Now, the only way black can live is to play this ko. White's going to run out of ko threads now. White doesn't have any ko threads. So white's going to finish the ko. And it turns out, although I think this is supposed to be better for white, there is a negative aspect too, because white has to go back to the lower right corner. And this final move that black plays at B is really big. And in the actual game, it turned out that white got to play at B first. So there is a loss that white is taking. The obvious gain that white is taking is in the lower left corner where white is. And this is actually a very close game too. I think maybe black's going to win by a small margin. So maybe it didn't change the outcome. But in any case, it was a very strange move. It was, locally, it seemed to be a mistake. But let's just see how it turns out. Black answers it. And black has this ko threat in the center. And now white plays here. But this is going to reduce the value of the ko. So black just finishes this one. And so at this point, white sort of gives up on the idea of trying to kill black. Like white could have played something like this to try to kill black. But black would be able to fight a ko here. And what I'm saying is that even if white wins the ko, it takes a lot of doing for white to actually save those 2 stones inside black's territory. So it's a less effective ko for white. Like even if black plays a ko thread like this, there would be less that white gets out of it. A very fine point, I guess. But white, I sort of agree with white giving up at this point, but we see black is alive now. Not 100% alive. So white has sort of gone in between the two extremes and still has a ko here, which white will not be able to do. There's still a ko here if white throws in here. And of course, if black captures the stone, it's going to be a ko. So I'm going to show in the variation black playing the other move, which black would play after taking the ko once, of course. And then again, we have this position where white can make a 4-stone shape to kill the black root. But there's going to be a ko attached to it because black's going to take this ko.
Wow. Holy moly.
Yeah, so if white connects now, black can make a second eye. If white doesn't connect, then black's going to capture that stone. And so this is a ko. It is a ko for the life of black's group.
Yeah, it just looks really scary.
It's scary, but white's taking a huge loss here when white loses the ko. It's going to be a huge amount of territory.
Huge, like how huge?
Well, like that's 4 stones black captured. So that's 8 points already. And there's a white stone inside black's territory. If we have something like, for instance, let's have white play some stupid move like that. Okay, so black's territory is something like, it's a huge black territory. Let's see, it's about 10 points there.
Okay.
And of course, the corner territory is gone for white. And so this, even if white plays something like this, it probably wouldn't be good enough. And the point is, black actually has some ko threats. Let's have black even answer that. Black probably has some ko threats against the white group too, like this one.
Wow.
Yeah. Actually, it might be simpler for black just to ignore this ko threat because the ko itself is so big that white would be just losing too many points. I'd have to really go and study the end game. I didn't go that far, but I have the feeling the ko is too big for white to play this ko.
Okay.
So so white cannot play the ko yet, but black did immediately put a stone in to get rid of it. So that allowed white to play this final big move, which is really big. Having black play at that point would reduce the white corner territory, and also it gives white a connection at C, which is going to make a big difference in the center. Right. When black plays at B, I've marked B because that's a point where black can attack white. And so black throws in. This is capturing, putting white in Damezmari there. Right. So we're entering the end game now. We're finally entering the end game, and for the most part, all of the ko's are over. Now we're going to just have small ko's, end game ko's, a couple of end game ko's, but they're not going to. So it's
just at this point, straightforward now, nothing fancy. Everything's fine.
Yeah, they're just going to play the big moves. Like this is a big that stops white from reducing the upper side, and it's a fairly straightforward end game now. Although white did mess up, but that's just because white was losing anyway. Let's see. So they're just playing then, and we can see the connection on the left there is working for white, and then black finishes off the territory here. A very straightforward variation. I think white, I put it in the SGF file, but my recollection is that black is winning by something like 1.75, 1 3/4 points. I mean stones.
Stones, yeah.
So that's something like 2.5 or 3.5 points. Yeah, but white's already giving up. White made that into a slightly larger, and we can see white's playing very strange moves here. Like this is an example of what programs that use Monte Carlo sometimes do. For instance, if black just connects here, this would be a terrible exchange for white. If black plays away, actually, white would be able to live with this sequence.
Sure.
So there is that possibility, which doesn't usually show up in AlphaGo. In general, although there's this effect that Monte Carlo has on Go programs, that when it has a losing game, sometimes it finds a forcing move to have the best possibility of a win. If you assume that the opponent plays away, then a co-threat-like move can sometimes give you a better percentage of winning. But AlphaGo is pretty much cured of that. but this could be an example of how sometimes it still does that towards the end of the game.
Interesting. Why does black not just respond the way you showed? I mean, that just seems fairly obvious.
Well, that would be a bigger win, obviously. It would be a big, but this is going to be a win too. So it doesn't matter. It's just an extra 2 points or 1 stone difference, maybe.
Oh, okay.
In the end, actually, white did lose a point or so. So it ended up being I think it's going to be 2 3/4 stones, or maybe 4.5 points, something like that. The complication of that code that's going to start in the lower left, which is probably going to be a small loss for white. But I think it's going to be something more like 4.5 points. So white has steadily lost probably a couple of points in the endgame sequence, in the final endgame sequence.
But your analysis is that it really was that middle game failure to capture the cutting stone, that white was in pretty good shape before that.
Yeah, coming back to this move here, or a few moves earlier, but especially this move where I think white should have just gone after the 1 stone. Actually, I would be suggesting that this is the correct variation, though. It's just so much more stable and less complication, and it looks like white's game is proceeding as planned. You might say it's working well for white, and white has good Aji in the center, and some territory that's going to build there, and it looks like white can win this game. But it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be another close game.
Right, and just to throw it out there, is it at all possible that that AlphaGo's assessment is that maybe white is already behind, and so it's trying to get more because of that? I'm just trying to figure out why. I mean, just because these moves are moves that seem fairly obvious, and
right. Well, yeah, that is that possibility. But it disagrees with my gut feeling for how the game is proceeding. And at this point of the game, we have something like 150 moves left. Sure. And we have this potential ko, which I know AlphaGo is going to start at some point in the lower left corner. With this move that black is going to play at some point. There's going to be a ko in the lower left corner. So it's going to be and with potential kos that are going to be that's going to be a very big ko if it does happen. Sure. It's very hard to predict the end game or to have a correct end game sequence. So it's just sort of beyond my abilities to create a diagram to show you something here. But my feeling is that it's going well for white. So I would disagree with that, but that would be a reason for white to sort of go off on a tangent like that.
Yeah, that's just fun. So it's an interesting game because unlike some of our other ones where we've had these fireworks and sort of sudden explosions of things in that when it seems like as things are wrapping up, this one kind of is a more subtle game. Which
and also it's something very educational because this kind of thing that happened to the white group here is very similar to what people should be thinking about in this kind of endgame. Because like when I play a handicap game against an amateur player, I will usually have weak groups naturally throughout the game. Sure. And dealing with these weak groups will be a big issue for me. And so especially towards the end game, I will often have a weak group like this white group on the left side. And so the whole game, the end game for me will be centered on building a territory to settle that white group. And if my opponent is an amateur player, maybe that opponent will not realize that. And so I keep adding moves to the white group, and I end up with a pretty big territory for it. So that would be what happens in a handicap game quite often. In an even game, usually you have both players trying to deal with that problem in center of the board, so it's less pronounced. But it's something that people disregard or don't realize a lot when they're playing, especially if they're not professional players. They don't realize that this is such an important area of the board, just because the center is such a hard area to find good moves in anyway.
Yes.
And so it's a very unusual mistake for AlphaGo to make, because AlphaGo is usually pretty good in the center.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was a very sharp attack that Black had here when Black cut and then played this peep here, which completely changed the tide of the game. It changed the flow, and it was very effective. So this was a key point in the game, and it's the realization that this center is so important in a game where there's a weak group like this is something that people can take away from this, I think.
Cool. Lots of good stuff to take away. All right, we're going to call it. And as always, thank you, Michael. Lots and lots of deep reading, and really appreciate that. A reminder to folks, keep those comments coming. If you have comments, but also if you have specific questions, sequential questions, as you might have picked up, Michael likes to look at variations. So we will be doing another Q&A and looking at some of those in the future. So keep those coming. So thank you, Michael. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.